Amazon rainforests have discovered an extensive network of cities dating back over 2,000 years. The highly structured pre-Hispanic settlements have been excavated in the Opano Valley.
12,000 years ago, someone sealed a door from the outside and walked away, and recently, scientists finally opened it. What was waiting inside had been kept perfectly preserved in the dark for longer than human civilization has existed. Seeds from extinct plants, bones arranged into structures that should not be possible, and a warning so specific it named the exact date the world ended. Nobody was supposed to find this place. The government had sealed the entire region off. And yet here we are, the last blind spot on Earth. The Amazon rainforest covers 7 million square kilometers, an area roughly the size of the entire continental United States, and contains 10% of all species on this planet. Despite every satellite ever launched and every drone ever deployed, we have mapped less of the Amazon floor than we have mapped the surface of Mars. The canopy is so dense and so relentlessly alive that it cannot be seen through from above, and what lives beneath it has been swallowing secrets for thousands of years without anyone noticing. This is why mainstream science spent most of the 20th century insisting the Amazon had never supported large or complex civilizations. The soil beneath the jungle sits on a geological base called laterite, which is thin, acidic, and drains water quickly, growing almost nothing useful for sustained farming. Academics concluded the people of the deep Amazon interior were small nomadic hunter-gatherers who moved through the trees seasonally and left almost no trace. For decades, that conclusion was considered settled, and anyone who questioned it was considered naive. It was completely wrong, and a technology called LiDAR is what proved it. A plane fires billions of laser pulses per second at the ground from above the canopy, and software builds a centimeter-accurate model of the surface beneath the trees, digitally erasing every trunk and vine. When researchers began using it across the Amazon in the 2010s, they found cities everywhere they looked. Surveys in Bolivia uncovered pyramids 22 meters tall and canal systems spanning 4,500 square kilometers. A 2024 study in Ecuador's Opano Valley revealed 15 interconnected cities connected by roads 15 meters wide, predating any other known complex Amazonian society by over 1,000 years. The textbook had not just been incomplete. It had been describing a fiction. In 2019, Dr. Ella Al-Shamahi pointed LiDAR at borderland between Brazil and Colombia that the Brazilian government had sealed from civilian access. No roads for hundreds of miles, violent storms, terrain that defeats modern expeditions. Every official record agreed nobody had ever been there. When the data came back, her entire lab went completely silent. What the laser revealed beneath that forbidden canopy was not scattered ruins or the ghost of an old camp, but something so geometrically precise and so deliberately ordered that no natural process on Earth could account for its existence. The invisible city. The processed screen showed perfectly straight lines running for miles across the landscape, crossing at right angles to form squares and plazas and raised platforms arranged in the unmistakable logic of a master-planned urban grid. Nature does not produce straight lines at that scale. What the LiDAR had uncovered beneath the canopy was a metropolis covering 30 square miles, buried under millennia of jungle growth, with irrigation channels, drainage networks, and raised causeways that all pointed to a civilization capable of moving earth and stone on an industrial level and managing water across an enormous territory. Everything about this shattered the textbook version of the region's past. To support a city of 30 square miles, a population needs large-scale coordinated agriculture, sophisticated hydraulic engineering, and the kind of institutional organization that takes generations to build. The people living here were not nomads passing through the trees. They were the builders of one of the largest urban centers in the ancient world, operating in a part of the Amazon that science had written off as empty wilderness. At the very center of the mapped area, at the base of a limestone ridge, the laser data revealed a perfect oval shape in the rock face, whose density readings were completely unlike everything surrounding it. Chemical analysis confirmed it was a sealed entrance and not a natural one. Someone had exposed the rock to extreme temperatures and fused it closed from the outside. The seal was manufactured 12,000 years ago and had never been opened since. The expedition's geochemist, Dr. Raj Patel from University College London, read those results and asked the only question that mattered: were they sealing something inside to protect it from the world, or sealing something inside to protect the world from it? Before anyone could move toward that entrance, they found something covering the cliff face directly above it that turned the question of what was inside into something far more urgent than anyone had anticipated. The mural of extinction reaching the site took weeks of cutting through some of the densest vegetation on Earth, in humidity so extreme that metal rusted overnight, and every piece of paper dissolved within days. When the team finally reached the base of the limestone ridge, they did not find the sealed entrance first. One assistant clearing moss from the cliff face nearby suddenly shouted. The rock beneath the moss was not gray. It was vivid, screaming red, and as the team cleared more surface, the red expanded into shapes, and the shapes became figures, and the figures became a mural stretching nearly 100 feet across the cliff face. Every animal depicted in that painting had been extinct for over 12,000 years. Mastodons were rendered with such precise anatomical accuracy that the muscle groups, the domed skull, and the curve of the tusks were all unmistakable. Giant ground sloths called Megatherium, standing 12 feet tall with claws as long as a human forearm, appeared alongside armored glyptodonts the size of small cars. These were Pleistocene megafauna, creatures that vanished suddenly from the continents at the end of the last ice age, and the people who painted them had seen them alive. When Dr. Raj Patel analyzed the pigment, he discovered the red ochre had been sourced from mineral deposits 400 miles away, meaning these people were moving materials across half a continent 12,000 years ago, with a level of logistical organization that the textbooks say should not have existed for another 10,000 years. The composition of the mural was what stopped the team cold. Every animal in it was running, all moving in the same direction, all fleeing in raw, unmistakable panic from a single point at the right edge of the painting. At the center of the stampede stood a lone human figure with arms raised, positioned beneath a circle with jagged lines radiating outward from it at every angle, descending from above like an object burning through the sky. Beside that figure, a tight cluster of dots was arranged in a pattern that was clearly not decorative. Dr. Sofia Vargas, the expedition's astronomer from the University of Sao Paulo, spent hours studying the dot arrangement before she stepped back and went pale. It was a star map, a precise astronomical record of the night sky as it appeared around 10,800 years BCE, placing the event depicted at the end of the Younger Dryas period. The Younger Dryas was one of the most catastrophic climate events in human history. It began 12,800 years ago, dropping temperatures across the northern hemisphere by up to 15 degrees Celsius within decades and wiping out 75% of all large animal species in the Americas. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes that a fragmented comet triggered this collapse through hemisphere-wide wildfires, atmospheric dust loading, and the shutdown of the ocean circulation system that regulates global temperature. Physical evidence, including microspherules, nanodiamonds, and platinum anomalies, has been found at dozens of sites worldwide, all deposited simultaneously at that 12,800-year boundary. The mural was a documentary record of that catastrophe, encoded in red ochre on stone, so remote that 12,000 years passed before another human being stood in front of it. The path worn into the cliff base led directly from the last figure in the mural to the sealed entrance below it, as though the builders had always intended for those two things to be read in exactly that order before anyone crossed the threshold. Breaking the seal. Up close, the entrance was covered in calcite flowstone, the mineral glaze that builds up over centuries as mineral-rich groundwater deposits thin layers across a rock surface. But the seal beneath it was not natural. The chemical composition confirmed it had been created by deliberate application of extreme heat, fusing the entrance rock into a single, unified mass. The calcite had formed over the top of the seal during the thousands of years since, as groundwater worked its way down the cliff face. Someone had manufactured this closure 12,000 years ago, and it had held perfectly. When the team first approached the entrance, every compass they were carrying began to spin, not drifting slightly, but rotating fully before snapping into a locked position, pointing directly at the sealed rock as though it were magnetic north. Every instrument on every team member did the same thing simultaneously. The surrounding formation was limestone, which is calcium carbonate and entirely non-magnetic. There was no geological explanation for a field strong enough to pull multiple compasses into simultaneous alignment. Something on the other side of the seal was generating a powerful localized magnetic anomaly, and nobody on the team could account for it. Drilling through the seal took 3 full days instead of the expected hour, with industrial diamond-tipped bits dulling at an abnormal rate against the fused material. When the breach finally opened, pressurized air rushed out, carrying not the smell of decay, but the charged metallic scent of ozone and iron, like a thunderstorm that had been sealed inside that rock for 12,000 years. Dr. Al-Shamahi went in first, and the floor her headlamp found was not rough cave stone, but a smooth, perfectly level paved surface made of terra preta, the engineered Amazonian dark earth whose carbon content runs 5 times higher than standard soil, whose crop yield improvements in agricultural trials reach 800%, and whose self-regenerating fertility modern scientists still cannot fully explain. Someone had used this man-made substance to pave the floor of a preservation facility before the last ice age ended. As the rest of the team descended and their light spread outward into the silence, the scale and the intention of what had been built inside that mountain began to reveal itself in a way that made every previous discovery at the site feel like a footnote. The Bone Cathedral. The passage opened into a central chamber, and Dr. Al-Shamahi stopped mid-step. Lining both walls in perfect arrangement were mastodon rib bones, each one over 6 feet in length, set into the terra preta floor in perfect arcs that rose symmetrically toward the ceiling and met at the top, forming a continuous ribcage tunnel running through the heart of the space. A cathedral assembled from the skeletons of creatures extinct for 12,000 years. A mastodon bull could weigh up to 7 tons, and assembling bones of that size into a load-bearing symmetrical vault underground, with every rib at the exact same angle as the ones beside it, required structural knowledge that mainstream archaeology insists should not have existed for another 10,000 years. The ceiling above was supported by pillars of basalt, a volcanic rock with no natural source anywhere in this part of the Amazon, transported from miles away through terrain that defeats modern expeditions. Floating in the preservation pool were seeds from plant species that had not existed anywhere on Earth for over 10,000 years. Extinct palms known only from fossil pollen records, medicinal plants documented only in ancient soil deposits, and food crops that were central to the agricultural systems of the world before the Younger Dryas destroyed those systems entirely. Dr. Marcus Chen, the Stanford paleobotanist on the expedition, had to step away from the pool's edge because his hands were visibly trembling. He said afterward that it felt like looking at the genetic memory of a lost world, still viable, still waiting in the dark for someone to come and use it. That pool and the seeds floating in it were not ceremonial and not symbolic, because everything about their construction pointed to people who had read the sky clearly, understood precisely what was coming, and made the deliberate decision to save everything they could before it arrived. The ark set into niches along the chamber walls were dozens of ceramic jars sealed with wax, every one still intact after 12,000 years. Inside were more seeds, dried tubers, and preserved tissue samples from agricultural crops of an era that ended before any known civilization had begun. The collection was clearly curated, a complete biological library representing the full agricultural knowledge of a sophisticated culture, assembled with the specific purpose of surviving catastrophe and making reconstruction possible on the other side of it. This was a doomsday vault, functionally identical in purpose to the Svalbard Global Seed Vault built in Norway in 2008, except constructed 12,000 years earlier by people every textbook had been calling primitive hunter-gatherers. At the back of the chamber, soot on the rear wall proved to be the thermal residue of a high-intensity blast, not from torches or fires, but from an impact event. Embedded within it were microspherules, the microscopic glass beads that form only when rock is melted by the energy of a cosmic collision or nuclear detonation. A 2024 study led by Dr. Christopher Moore of the University of South Carolina identified the exact same microspherules alongside platinum anomalies and melt glass across multiple North American sites, all deposited at precisely 12,800 years ago. The microspherules in this wall were the same material and the same age, physical proof that the impact shockwave had reached this location. The heat had fused the entrance shut from the outside. The chamber had not been sealed by the builders. It had been sealed by the catastrophe they had spent years preparing to survive. Near the pool, arranged on the floor with the deliberate order of someone setting tools down between tasks, was a set of obsidian blades and chisels. Obsidian is volcanic glass, and there is no geological source of it anywhere in the Amazon basin. The nearest natural deposits are in the Andes Mountains, over 1,000 miles away, across terrain that even modern expeditions with full support find brutally difficult. The presence of those tools in this chamber proved the existence of a trade network of continental scope, systematic and reliable enough that high-value fragile volcanic glass was a standard workshop material at a site buried in the deepest Amazon interior. The obsidian confirmed a world far more organized and far more connected than any textbook had ever imagined, but it was the arrangement of those tools and the total absence of the people who had placed them there that turned the chamber into a question that 12,000 years of silence had not answered: the vanishing. The tools were laid out neatly and perfectly parallel, a chisel in one position, a hammerstone beside it, placed with the care of a craftsman who fully intends to return. Ground-penetrating radar swept every centimeter of the chamber, and the result was identical everywhere. No human remains, not one fragment of bone, no burial pit, and no sign of death or struggle. Every logical explanation collapses under the same weight. If the impact sealed the entrance before the builders could enter, their remains would be near the door, and they are not. If they were inside when it sealed, their bones would be on the floor, and they are not. If they left through an undiscovered passage, they would have taken the obsidian tools with them, and they did not. These people were here, and then they were simply gone. Dozens of unconnected Amazon tribes, separated by hundreds of miles and speaking languages with no common ancestor, all carry the same account of beings called the Ant People, ancestors of humanity who entered a vast underground network beneath the rainforest when the surface world was destroyed. The LiDAR surveys of the surrounding region have already identified what appear to be tunnel systems connecting multiple sites across hundreds of miles of unexcavated territory. This chamber may not be a sealed room at all. It may be the first door in something far larger than any survey has yet been able to reach. The symbols carved into those obsidian tools match motifs at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the world's oldest known monumental architecture built 11,600 years ago on the opposite side of the planet. Identical symbolic vocabularies appear at ancient sites in Bolivia, Easter Island, Egypt, and Polynesia, all converging on the same catastrophic period. Across cultures, the standard historical model says had no contact with each other. The Amazon contains over 2 million square miles of territory never studied by archaeologists, and this survey covered less than 1% of it. Somewhere beneath that canopy, there are other sealed chambers, other preservation pools, other ceramic jars holding the botanical memory of a world that ended 12,000 years ago, still waiting in the dark. A civilization that understood the sky, built an ark, and did everything right still got erased in a single night. Everything they saved is still down there, still waiting. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are we any smarter than they were?